Welcome to WikiPodcast.
Hello.
Today we're diving into our elementary philosophy mini-series again, this time focusing on, well, a giant.
Plato.
Absolutely, a truly foundational figure.
We've got his dialogues, later accounts, and our aim is really to pull out the core stuff that still resonates, especially his big move in founding the academy.
It really is something, isn't it? How relevant he still feels. Born, around 428 BC in Athens?
Right.
He didn't just shape what we think about, but how we think about it. The written dialogue, the dialectic method. Game changers.
Totally. And for this deep dive, we really want to zero in on the academy. Founding that institution in Athens, that was massive for philosophy's history.
The real turning point.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself, his background, his family, and that name, Plato. What's the story there?
Well, he came from a pretty high-status Athenian family. His father, Ariston, might have even had links back to ancient kings.
Wow, really?
Yeah, Codrus, Melanthus. And his mother, Perixene, she was related to Solon, the famous statesman.
So, serious connection, definitely. He had siblings too, Glaucon, Adeimantus, Potertone, and a half-brother, Antiphon. So, yeah, quite the influential circle.
It certainly sounds like it. Now, the name Plato, it's quite distinctive. I think I've heard the traditional explanation.
Yeah, yes, the old story. It goes that his birth name was actually Aristocles, meaning best reputation.
Okay.
And Platon, the nickname, is often tied to the Greek word for broad. Now, why broad? That's where it gets interesting.
How so?
Well, suggestions range from his wrestling coach commenting on his physique.
His build.
Exactly. Or maybe it referred to the breadth of his eloquence, his speaking style, or even just, a wide forehead.
Huh. A broad range of possibilities, then.
Precisely. But you asked if it's still accepted.
Yeah, do scholars buy the Aristocles story?
Increasingly, no. Modern scholarship tends to be a bit skeptical.
Yeah.
Some argue Plato was his given name, and Platon wasn't actually that uncommon in Athens back then. So it was just a nickname idea. It's less favored now. It just shows you even a name can be complex history.
That's fascinating. History always being re-examined.
I know.
Okay, let's move to his ideas. Who were the big influences on Plato's thinking?
Right. Several key figures and schools. Number one, without a doubt, Socrates.
His teacher.
His mentor, yeah. Socrates is the main speaker in almost all the dialogues except for the laws.
And his method.
The Socratic method, the dialectic. That constant questioning.
Yeah.
It's absolutely core to Plato's whole philosophical approach.
But that leads to the Socratic problem, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Figuring out whose ideas are whose.
Exactly, because we mostly know Socrates through Plato. We have Xenophon and Aristophanes too, but they paint different pictures.
Right.
And even Aristotle attributes different views.
Right.
Like Aristotle suggests Socrates' thought forms were discoverable in the world, whereas Plato put his forms somewhere else entirely.
In a separate realm.
Yeah. So untangling them is, tricky.
A real puzzle. Okay, besides Socrates, who else was shaping his thought?
Pythagoreanism was huge. The followers of Pythagoras.
Samarkand, mysticism.
Kind of, yeah. Their focus on mathematics, abstract thinking. Plato saw that as a solid basis for philosophy, even for morals.
Interesting.
And their idea of a tightly organized community might have influenced Plato's Republic. Plus, they had this mystical view of the soul that seems to have resonated with him.
What were their core beliefs?
Things like all things are number, the cosmos comes from numerical principles, form is distinct from matter, and the idea that our physical world is just an imitation of some eternal mathematical reality. You can really see the echoes in Plato.
A blend of logic and something more spiritual.
You could put it that way. It's a powerful mix.
Any other pre-Socratics we should mention?
Definitely Heraclitus and Parmenides. They were trying to move beyond the old mythological explanations.
Heraclitus, the change guy. Can't step in the same river twice.
That's him. Constant flux, everything defined by opposites. Plato probably got these ideas via Cratylus.
Okay, and Parmenides.
Parmenides was the opposite, really. He argued for a changeless, eternal universe. Change, for him, was just an illusion.
Wow, talk about opposites.
Right, and Plato actually grapples with Parmenides' ideas directly in his dialogue, the Parmenides. It's quite self-critical.
So these debates about change and permanence, they fed into his own big theory.
Absolutely. They laid the groundwork for his theory of forms.
Okay, let's get into that. The theory of forms, or ideas, it's central to Plato, isn't it? What's the core idea?
It really is. It's Plato's answer to the problem of universals. Like, how can lots of different things all be chairs or beautiful?
Right.
He proposed two realms. There's the world we see and touch, the material world, always changing.
Our everyday world.
Exactly. And then there's this other world, unseen, eternal, unchanging, the world of forms, accessible only through reason.
And these forms are what exactly? Perfect versions.
Sort of perfect blueprints, yeah. They're the ideal types, properties, patterns, like tableness itself or
Ooh.
perfect justice, truth, beauty.
So the physical table is just participating in the form of tableness.
That's the idea. The form is the real perfect thing. Our table is just an imperfect copy. He formally introduces this in the Phaedo.
So our senses only show us shadows, basically, like the allegory of the cave.
That's a great analogy, yeah, very much in line with it. He often used geometry, like the Pythagorean theorem, as an example.
How so?
Well, the theorem is true, perfectly true, even if we can't draw a physically perfect right-angled triangle. It points to a reality beyond the physical.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Now, another key piece is the soul. What did Plato believe about the soul?
For Plato, the soul is what gives life. It animates the body. And crucially, he believed it was immortal.
Immortal.
Yep. He talks about it a lot, especially in dialogues discussing the afterlife. In the Timaeus, he even kind of maps it onto the body.
Maps it.
Yeah, like reason is in the head, spirit or courage in the upper chest, and appetite, desires down in the midsection.
Huh. And did he believe in reincarnation?
He discusses it, certainly, in the Phaedo, Timaeus. Whether he meant it literally, well, that's still debated by scholars.
Okay. And how does the soul connect to knowledge? Something about remembering.
Recollection, yes. His idea was that learning isn't really about discovering totally new things from scratch through our senses.
It's not.
Not entirely. It's more like the soul remembering the forms it knew before it was born, before it entered a body.
Remembering.
Exactly. The famous example is in the Matono. Socrates questions a slave boy who hasn't been taught geometry and guides him just through questions to figure out a geometric proof. Plato argues this shows the knowledge was already in him, latent, a memory of the forms.
Wow. So learning is unlocking what's already there.
Yeah.
There's a different way to think about it. Shifting gears slightly then to epistemology, how we know things.
Right. Well, Plato was very skeptical about relying only on the senses.
Because they only show the changing world.
Precisely. He thought true reality, the forms, was beyond the senses. He had that line, "He who sees with his eyes is blind."
Strong words.
Yeah, suggesting true sight is intellectual. In the Theaetetus, he kind of criticizes people who only believe in physical stuff, calling them happily without the muses.
Right.
Like they're missing out on a whole dimension of reality.
So if not the senses, how do we gain true knowledge, according to Plato?
Through reason, through the intellect grasping the forms, and crucially, through understanding the relationships between forms.
No.
Using a method called dialectic, it involves carefully collecting related concepts and then dividing them, making distinctions. Think of it like carefully sorting and defining ideas.
Okay.
He argues in the Timaeus that the certainty of your knowledge depends on the realm it comes from. Senses give you opinions unstable because the world changes.
Right.
But grasping the forms, which are stable and eternal, gives you true knowledge. This intellectual grasp is probably what he meant by needing a justification or account for a belief to count as knowledge.
So dialectic helps us move from opinion to knowledge by accessing the forms.
That's the idea. It's a rigorous intellectual process.
Which brings us perfectly to the Academy, probably his most, concrete legacy. Tell us about founding that.
Yeah, hugely significant. He founded it when he was about 40 in Athens.
Where exactly?
On land in a grove named after a hero, Hecademus, or Academus, that's where the name comes from.
And it lasted a long time.
Oh yes, it operated for centuries until the Roman general Sulla destroyed it in 84 BC.
Wow. And its purpose?
It was the philosophical school of its time. It attracted tons of students, the most famous being Aristotle, of course.
Of course.
It was the center for teaching and developing what we now call Platonism. It really shows Plato's commitment to, well, a structured way of pursuing and passing on philosophy.
More than just lectures, right? A community.
Absolutely. A community dedicated to inquiry. Its sheer longevity underlines the power of his ideas and this model. Dedicated spaces for thinking. We still see that today, don't we?
We do. Now, Plato didn't just stay in Athens teaching, did he? He got involved in politics, traveled.
That's right. There's evidence he traveled Italy, Sicily, maybe Egypt, Cyrene.
And the Sicily part got complicated. Syracuse.
Very complicated. He got involved with the rulers there, Dionysius I, then his son Dionysius II. He tried to advise them, make them into philosopher kings, essentially. He even had Dionysius's brother-in-law, Dion, as a student.
How did that work out?
Not well. It was dangerous. Plato apparently faced real peril, even got sold into slavery at one point.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Sold into slavery.
Yeah, though accounts differ on exactly when and how he was rescued. His seventh letter talks a lot about these experiences, the difficulties of applying philosophy to real-world power.
Quite the life. So, moving towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
how did Plato die?
Well, like with much of his life, there are different stories.
Oh.
One tradition says peacefully in bed, listening to a flute girl. Another says at a wedding feast. Tertullian just said he died in his sleep.
Simple enough.
But recently, there was a scroll found at Herculaneum.
Yeah. What did it say?
It seems to confirm he was buried right there in the Academy garden near a shrine to the Muses. And apparently, even near the very end, he was still critiquing a musician's rhythm.
Ever the philosopher.
Amazing.
So, let's wrap up. His legacy. Why is Plato still so important?
It's just immense. First off, his work survived pretty much all of them for 2,400 years. That's incredible.
Truly.
He massively influenced Neoplatonism, Christian philosophy through figures like Augustine, Islamic philosophy via thinkers like Al-Farabi.
Right.
And then there's that famous quote from Whitehead.
The footnotes to Plato one.
Exactly. The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. It might be a bit hyperbolic, but it captures his foundational rule.
It really does.
He had a huge revival in the Renaissance, influenced scientists, artists, the Cambridge Platonists. His reputation really solidified in the 19th century. He even impacted modern logic and math. Einstein saw parallels between scientists and Platonists.
So, despite criticisms later on,
Oh yeah, Nietzsche, Heidegger, Popper, they all had critiques. But the fact we still engage with his ideas, debate them, that proves his enduring power. He's just unavoidable in Western thought.
okay, so what does this all mean for you listening? Well, Plato setting up the academy really underlines how vital dedicated spaces are for thinking, for developing ideas systematically.
Mm-hmm. And his core theories about reality, knowledge, the soul, even if you don't agree with them, they fundamentally shape the questions we still ask.
So consider this. Plato thought real knowledge comes from understanding a reality beyond our senses. How could that idea challenge or maybe enrich how you see the world, the information you get every day?
It's a powerful thought to sit with.
Thanks for listening. Write us in the comments your opinion on the episode and what other topics you would like us to talk about. Subscribe to the channel to help us reach more listeners. Thank you and have an amazing day.